in the heart of a bustling city, where hurried footsteps echoed against towering skyscrapers and the glow of digital screens never faded, lived a young woman named Lynn. By all external measures, she was successful, an accomplished software engineer, well respected in her field. Yet, despite her achievements, she often felt adrift, as if she were merely a spectator in her own life. Her mind was a battlefield, a relentless storm of thoughts and emotions. She was haunted by past regrets, words she wished she could take back, choices she wished she had made differently, and when she wasn't replaying old mistakes, she was consumed by anxieties about the future. Would she be successful enough? Would she ever find true happiness? What if everything she had built suddenly crumbled? No matter how hard she worked, no matter how much she accomplished, there was always something missing: peace. One evening, after yet another long, exhausting day at work, Lynn wandered aimlessly through the city. The neon lights of restaurants and coffee shops flickered around her, casting reflections on the damp pavement. People moved past her in hurried blurs, some lost in their phones, others engaged in hurried conversations. The world was always rushing forward, and she felt as though she was being dragged along, powerless to pause, to breathe, to truly live. And then, just as she turned a quiet corner, something unexpected caught her attention: a pagoda, its ancient wooden doors standing in stark contrast to the modern skyline that loomed behind it. The scent of incense drifted through the cool night air, mingling with the soft, rhythmic sound of chanting from within. For reasons she could not explain, she felt drawn to it, as if an invisible force was guiding her forward. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The world outside seemed to melt away as she crossed the threshold. The flickering candlelight illuminated golden statues of the Buddha, their faces serene, untouched by the urgency of time. Monks moved quietly through the space, their robes whispering against the stone floor, and at the center of it all, seated in deep meditation, was an elderly monk. His presence alone was enough to still the noise in her mind. He radiated a profound sense of peace, one that stood in sharp contrast to the chaos Lynn carried within her. She watched him for a moment, mesmerized. How could someone exist with such stillness when the world outside was in constant motion? Gathering her courage, she approached him. "Master," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the stillness of the room, "my mind is always trapped between my past mistakes and my future worries. I never feel truly at peace. How can I live in the present moment?" The monk slowly opened his eyes, their depth reflecting years of wisdom. He studied her for a moment, then smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. Without a word, he gestured for her to sit beside him. "My child," he began, his voice like the steady flow of a river, "you are not alone in this struggle. Most people are like travelers lost in time, dwelling on a past they cannot change or fearing a future that has yet to come. But the truth is, the only place life truly exists is here and now. The past is a memory, the future is a dream, but the present is all we ever truly have." Lynn listened intently, his words sinking into the depths of her consciousness. It was a simple truth, yet one she had never fully grasped before. As she sat in that quiet sanctuary, surrounded by the scent of incense and the rhythmic sound of distant chanting, something inside her began to shift. The restlessness that had plagued her for so long started to fade, replaced by a single, profound realization: perhaps peace had never been something to chase. Perhaps it had always been here, waiting for her, in the present moment. She leaned forward, eager to hear more as Thay Min began to share the wisdom of mindfulness, the key to finding peace in every moment. Understanding mindfulness and the present moment. Lynn stared at the steaming cup of tea in her hands. It was a simple question, yet it unraveled something deep within her. Had she ever truly tasted a cup of tea? Of course, she drank tea every morning, but as she thought about it, she realized that she barely remembered the experience itself. It was always part of her routine, a hurried sip between checking emails. An absent-minded gulp while preparing for work. A distraction in the midst of 1,000 thoughts. Fei Min smiled as he observed her realization. The present moment, he said gently, is like this cup of tea. If you are lost in thoughts of yesterday, or anxiously planning for tomorrow, you miss what is right in front of you. But if you bring your full awareness to it, to the warmth of the cup in your hands, the rising steam, the delicate fragrance, the way the liquid touches your lips, you are truly living. Lin nodded slowly. The concept was simple, yet profound. For the first time, she brought the cup closer and inhaled deeply. The subtle, earthy aroma of green tea filled her senses. She noticed how the steam curled upward, vanishing into the cool air. As she took a small sip, she focused on nothing else, the gentle bitterness, the warmth traveling down her throat, the quiet comfort it brought. She had been drinking tea her whole life, but in that moment, it felt like she was experiencing it for the very first time. This, the monk said, is mindfulness, the art of being fully present in whatever you are doing. It is not about forcing the mind to be empty, nor is it about escaping reality. Rather, it is about awakening to reality, observing each moment as it unfolds. Without judgment, without distraction. Lin exhaled, as if releasing something heavy inside her. So mindfulness is not just about meditation, she asked. Fei Min chuckled. Not at all. Many people think that mindfulness is something that only happens when we sit cross-legged in meditation. But in truth, mindfulness is woven into the fabric of everyday life. When you eat, eat. When you walk, walk. When you listen, listen. Most people live their days in a fog of distraction. They eat while scrolling through their phones, barely tasting their food. They walk while lost in thought, barely noticing the sky above or the ground beneath them. Even when they are with loved ones, their minds are elsewhere, replaying the past, planning the future. But when you practice mindfulness, you wake up to the sound of birds in the morning, to the feel of the sun on your skin, to the rhythm of your own breath. Life becomes richer, fuller. Every moment, no matter how ordinary, becomes sacred. Lin thought about her daily routine, how often she ate meals without tasting them, how many conversations she had while distracted, how many sunsets she had missed because she was too busy thinking about what came next. Is it really that simple? She asked. Yes, Fei Min said, but simple does not always mean easy. The mind is restless by nature. It constantly jumps from one thought to another, like a monkey swinging from branch to branch. That is why mindfulness must be cultivated, again and again, until it becomes natural. He paused and picked up his own cup of tea. Start small. When you drink tea, just drink tea. When you eat, just eat. When you breathe, just breathe. Each time your mind wanders, gently bring it back, not with frustration, but with kindness, like guiding a child back home. Lin took a deep breath, allowing herself to absorb his words. Could it really be that simple? Could peace, the thing she had been chasing for so long, be found not in the future, but in the depth of this very moment? That night, as she walked home, she paid attention to things she had never noticed before. The soft hum of cicadas in the trees, the cool breeze against her skin, the rhythmic sound of her own footsteps. It was as if she was stepping into life for the first time. Determined to break free from the cycle of mental distractions, Lin resolved to apply these teachings in her daily life, one breath, one moment at a time. The story of the desert traveler, letting go of burdens. A week later, Lin returned to the pagoda. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and blooming jasmine. Inside, the pagoda was quiet except for the faint sound of a monk's bell in the distance. She found Fei Min seated in his usual place, eyes half closed in serene meditation. Lin hesitated before approaching. She had spent the past week practicing mindfulness as he had taught her, pausing to breathe deeply, paying full attention to her surroundings. focusing on the present, and yet, something still weighed heavily on her. "Master," she finally said, kneeling before him, "I've been practicing mindfulness, but I still feel burdened by my past. The mistakes I've made, the things I regret, I can't seem to let them go. They follow me everywhere, like a shadow I can't escape." Fei Min opened his eyes and studied her for a moment. Then, with a gentle nod, he began to speak. "Let me tell you a story, my child," he said. "There was once a man who set out on a long journey across the desert. He had nothing but a small satchel of food and water to sustain him. The sun was relentless, beating down upon him as he walked across the endless dunes. After many miles, he stumbled upon a patch of land where the sand had been swept away, revealing a collection of shimmering stones beneath the surface. They sparkled under the sunlight, their colors rich and deep. These must be valuable, he thought, bending down to pick one up. He examined it closely, feeling its smooth surface, the weight of it in his palm. He placed it in his bag, convinced it might be useful. As he continued his journey, he came across more of these stones, each one slightly different but just as beautiful. Unable to resist, he gathered them, believing that they would bring him wealth or serve some great purpose later on. With each step, his bag grew heavier, but the man reassured himself, this burden was worth carrying. Hours turned to days. The heat of the desert was merciless, and his body grew weary. The bag that once felt light now dragged him down with every step. His shoulders ached, his breath became labored, yet still, he clung to the stones. Until finally, his exhaustion overcame him, he collapsed onto the sand, unable to move. It was in that moment, as he lay beneath the vast, empty sky, that a realization struck him. These stones, these things he had clung to so tightly, were not helping him. They were only making his journey harder. And so, with great effort, he reached into his bag and took out the stones. One by one, he let them fall to the sand. With each stone he released, he felt lighter, his steps grew easier, the weight that had been holding him back for so long was gone. By the time he reached his destination, he had nothing in his hands, but everything in his heart. Lin sat in silence, absorbing the story. She saw herself in the traveler, the way she had carried the weight of her past. The regrets, the mistakes she wished she could undo. She had been filling her mind with these burdens, believing she needed to hold on to them, as if they defined who she was. Fei Min's voice was gentle but firm as he spoke again. "The past," he said, "is like those stones. You can either carry them forever, allowing them to slow you down, or you can set them down and walk freely." Lin lowered her gaze, her fingers curling into her lap. "But how?" she whispered. "How do I let go of something that has shaped me?" Fei Min smiled. "You do not need to erase the past, nor do you need to pretend it never happened. You simply need to release its hold over you. Acknowledge it, learn from it, and then, put it down." He gestured toward a small rock near his feet. "Pick up that stone." Lin hesitated, then reached for it. It was smooth and round, fitting perfectly in her palm. "Now," Fei Min instructed, "squeeze it tightly." She obeyed, curling her fingers around it until her knuckles turned white. "Does it feel natural?" "No," Lin admitted, "it feels tense." "Exactly," he said, "holding on to something unnecessary takes energy. Now, let it go." Lin slowly opened her fingers, allowing the rock to drop onto the ground. She felt an odd sense of relief, as if she had released something deeper than just the stone. "The past is already gone, Lin," Fei Min said. "It exists only in your mind, like the weight of that stone. The only thing keeping it alive is your grip on it." Lin exhaled deeply, the tightness in her chest loosening ever so slightly. That night, as she walked home, she thought about the stones she had been carrying in her own life, the guilt, the self-doubt, the pain she had refused to let go of. And with each step, she silently promised herself, "I will set him down. I will walk freely." Practical ways to live in the present. Lin sat in quiet contemplation, absorbing the wisdom that Thay Min had shared. Letting go of the past, something that had weighed her down for so long, felt liberating. But now, a new question arose within her: how do I truly live in the present? She turned to the monk, her eyes filled with curiosity. "But how do I let go? How do I truly live in the present?" she asked. Thay Min smiled, his expression kind yet knowing. "There are many ways, but let me share 3 simple ones. 1. Return to your breath." He gestured toward the incense burning nearby. The smoke curled and danced gently, disappearing into the air. "Your breath," he said, "is like this smoke, always moving, always present, yet often unnoticed." Lin watched as the smoke drifted upward. She had never really thought about her breath before. It was something that simply happened in the background, like the beating of her heart. "Your breath is always with you," the monk continued. "It is the bridge between your mind and the present moment. No matter where you are or what you are doing, your breath is there, anchoring you." He placed a hand on his chest. "Whenever you feel overwhelmed, by thoughts, by emotions, by the weight of life, pause. Breathe in deeply, feel the air enter your lungs, and exhale slowly. This simple act brings you back to the now." Lin followed his instruction, inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly. As she did, she felt an unexpected sense of clarity. Her mind, which had been so tangled with worries just moments before, began to settle. "Each breath," Thay Min continued, "is a reminder that you are alive. Here, in this very moment. Use it, whenever your thoughts pull you away, into the past, into the future, return to your breath. Let it guide you home." 2. Mindful awareness in daily life. The monk then reached for a simple wooden cup and lifted it to his lips. He took a slow sip of tea, his eyes closed as he savored the taste. Setting the cup down, he looked at Lin. "When you eat, eat. When you walk, walk. When you listen, listen." Lin tilted her head, intrigued by the simplicity of his words. "So often," he explained, "people go through their days distracted. They eat while scrolling through their phones, walk while lost in thought, listen while already planning what to say next. They are physically present but mentally elsewhere." He gestured around them. "Life is happening now, but if you are always caught up in thoughts of yesterday or worries about tomorrow, you will miss it." Lin thought about her own habits. How often had she eaten a meal without really tasting it? How many walks had she taken without noticing the world around her? How many conversations had she half listened to, her mind occupied with something else? She nodded. "So mindfulness is about fully experiencing each moment." "Yes," Thay Min said, "bring your full attention to whatever you are doing, no matter how small. If you are drinking tea, just drink tea. Feel the warmth of the cup in your hands. Notice the fragrance. Truly taste it. If you are walking, just walk. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Listen to the sounds around you." When you do something with full awareness, even the simplest act becomes profound. The ordinary transforms into the extraordinary. Lin let the words settle in her heart. She had spent so much of her life rushing, trying to reach the next thing, that she had forgotten to live the moments in between. 3. Practice gratitude. The monk's gaze softened as he continued. "And finally, gratitude. It is one of the most powerful ways to bring yourself into the present." He picked up a small leaf that had fallen onto the stone floor. Holding it between his fingers, he turned it gently, admiring its delicate veins. "Most people spend their lives focusing on what they lack," he said. "They chase after more success, more possessions, more recognition, always believing happiness lies somewhere in the future. But true happiness is not found in what you do not have. It is found in appreciating what is already here. Lynn thought about her own life. She had always been striving, working harder, achieving more, yet no matter how much she accomplished, there was always something else to reach for. Had she ever truly paused to appreciate what she already had? Fei Min continued, each morning, before you begin your day, think of 3 things you are grateful for. They do not need to be big. They can be as simple as the warmth of the sun on your skin, the kindness of a friend, the sound of birds in the morning. When you cultivate gratitude, you shift your focus from what is missing to what is present. You begin to see that life is already full of blessings, if only you take the time to notice them. Lynn nodded slowly. Perhaps she had been so focused on chasing happiness that she had overlooked the joy already present in her life. A transformation begins. Determined, Lynn committed to practicing these 3 techniques. She began each morning by breathing deeply, centering herself before the rush of the day began. She paid attention to the details of her life, the taste of her food, the feeling of the wind, the laughter of a friend, and each night, before sleeping, she wrote down 3 things she was grateful for. At first, it felt unfamiliar, even difficult, but as days passed, something began to shift within her. She felt lighter. The burden of her past no longer weighed so heavily on her shoulders. She smiled more, not because life had changed, but because she was finally noticing its beauty. She lived each moment, fully, deeply, with presence. One evening, as she sipped her tea, she realized something. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she was not thinking about yesterday. She was not worrying about tomorrow. She was simply here. And for the first time, that was enough. Conclusion: embracing the present. Months passed, and something remarkable began to happen. Lynn's colleagues, her friends, even her family started noticing the change. She no longer rushed through her days, burdened by an endless to-do list. She no longer looked distracted when someone spoke to her, lost in thoughts of things that had happened or things yet to come. She seemed lighter, more at ease. There was a calmness in her presence, a quiet joy in the way she carried herself. One afternoon at work, as she sat by the window, sipping tea and watching the soft sway of tree branches outside, a colleague approached her. "You seem different lately," they said. "You're more at peace. What changed?" Lynn smiled, setting her cup down gently. "I stopped chasing time," she said. "Instead, I embraced this moment." For years, she had been running, chasing success, chasing happiness, chasing some undefined version of fulfillment that always seemed just out of reach. She had believed that peace would come later, when she achieved more, when she fixed her past mistakes, when she secured a better future. But Fei Min's wisdom had taught her a different truth. Peace is not found in the past or the future. It is only found in the now. And so, she had begun living this moment fully. She no longer gulped down her morning tea mindlessly. She tasted it, the warmth against her lips, the delicate bitterness balanced by its soothing aroma. She no longer walked hurriedly from one place to another. She felt the earth beneath her feet, the way the ground supported her with every step, the gentle rhythm of movement that connected her to the world around her. She no longer took her breath for granted. She breathed with awareness, feeling the air enter her lungs, the rise and fall of her chest, the simple miracle of being alive. And through these small moments, she had found what she had been searching for all along. She had found peace. The eternal wisdom of the present. Fei Min's words echoed in her mind, a lesson passed down through time, yet as relevant now as it had ever been. The past is gone. No matter how much we dwell on it, we cannot change it. Carrying regrets only burdens the heart. The future is unknown. We can prepare for it, but we cannot control it. Worrying about it steals the joy of today. The only place where life truly happens is in the present. And when we embrace it, When we fully open ourselves to the richness of this moment, we find freedom. The world had not changed. Life still had its challenges, its uncertainties, its imperfections, but Lynn had changed. She no longer resisted the flow of life. She no longer clung to what had been or feared what was to come. Instead, she lived fully, deeply, now. And that, she realized, was enough.